Hey everybody, it is Allison Nielsen coming to you live from Amelia Island, Florida. And I'm coming to you live this evening to talk about a subject that may be difficult to talk about. It's a sensitive subject. We're talking about substance misuse and suicide. So please be mindful of that. I'm going to be as sensitive as I can be. The guest that I have for you tonight has a very compelling story to share with you. So please ask any questions in the comments. I'm going to be keeping my eye on the questions so that I can ask my guest to answer those questions. And if we don't get to them, we'll make sure that we get to them after this. Let me tell you how I know Karen Ann. Actually, Karen Ann, I've known her for almost 20 years. We met when we were both working at the YMCA in Rockport, Maine. And Karen Ann still works for the YMCA. And of course, I moved to Florida, so I no longer work for the YMCA. But she is a beautiful person inside and out. And I am so very grateful that she's willing to share her story with you all this evening. And we both agree that if we can help just one person with this live, then we've done our job. So I'm going to bring Karen on. Karen Ann. Hey, Karen Ann.
Hey there.
Everybody, this is my friend Karen Ann, and I am just going to let Karen Ann start to share her story. I have some questions for her, but I want her to share her story. And we're just going to let this be organic. We don't have a time frame on this. Usually I try and keep my interviews relatively short, but with this topic, I feel like we need to let it be organic. So there is no time frame. So Karen, please share your story with us.
Sure. Thank you for asking me to. One of the things that is important is that I share my story because it brings it back for me as to where I've come from in the work that I've done and where I'm at now. And the transformation is huge for others. And often I don't see it myself. So it's important that I tell the story. And like you said, if we can help even one person, that is all the struggles that we endure in life doesn't go in vain. So, I tell my story from the very beginning because I think it's important. I grew up in a home of 4 big brothers and a dad who really, really wanted a girl. And my mom was so patient and wanted to make him happy and provide him with that girl. And he had 4 lovely boys, but he just really wanted a girl. And the whole community knew about that. And finally, I came along. I still hear from community members how, your dad wanted a girl so badly.
Yeah.
And so we had dinners at the table, and we had board games on weekends, and we had, homework together. And I remember swinging on a swing, and this has been important in my story. Is I remember swinging on my swing set, feeling like there's not a care in the world, feeling so secure and trusting, life and adults. And what I didn't know is that the struggles of adults. I didn't know the reality of what takes place in some homes. And there was a day that I skipped school, and I had really been sick the day before, and I skipped school, and I heard my dad get up and make breakfast and do his exercises. And he came into my bedroom and rubbed my head and said, "I loved you," even though I was pretending to be asleep. And we're a family that say "I love you" too, but I was sick.
Right.
So I didn't, I didn't open my eyes. And I wanted to go watch The Price is Right because I knew the winner was rolling over into the next day. And I was watching TV, and a sheriff pulled into the yard and came to the door and asked for my mom, and that was confusing for me. And lo and behold, my dad had taken a right out of the driveway and went up on a dirt road and ended his life.
Mm-hmm. And how old were you at that point,
And
Karen?
I was 12 years old.
Okay.
I was 12 years old.
Okay.
So you can imagine the rush of activity that took place in my home, and people started showing up, and uh, my big brother, my oldest brother, he was 23 at the time, came in, and my mom was crying, and he let me know exactly what had happened. And that was the most painful day of my life, and just so confusing as a 12-year-old little girl who was a daddy's girl. And
Right.
what happened there, it was in 83. So you can imagine, I know you and I wanted to talk about stigma with the folks today. And in 83, the stigma around suicide, suicide's still a really hot topic and a hard, the rates are rising, especially because of COVID. But back then it was, a topic you don't talk about.
Right.
And so I lived many years not even mentioning my dad. After that 2 weeks of like logistics of a funeral and watching people, and and I think what I understand now is that feeling of security that I felt on that swing set
Yeah.
became a lie to me.
Yeah.
So I struggled a
couldn't
lot.
trust that. You couldn't trust that feeling anymore.
Yeah, I couldn't trust anything that felt secure. I couldn't trust anything that felt good. And mind you, I've done a lot of work to understand that now. But then I didn't understand those feelings and those thoughts that were going on for me. So what I did is I said, when I tell my story to groups of people, I explain, like, first came food. I was 12 years old. So first came food and how to manipulate food. I remember the squares, remember in our cafeteria trays, and I would make a decision which square I would not eat.
Okay.
So an eating disorder instilled at 12 years old, shortly after dad passed. What I had discovered is a lot of, my mom was a drinker and she went out a lot, but my dad entertained me. So
Right.
what ended up happening is I started seeing that stuff. And my mom, what I understand now, was probably an alcoholic. She brought the party into the home,
Right.
the drinking into the home. And
Because she couldn't leave you anymore. Because she
yeah,
had.
she didn't want to leave me,
Yeah.
but she didn't want to leave her coping mechanism, right?
Sure. Sure.
So I witnessed a lot. I experienced a lot that girls probably shouldn't experience. Um, and I'm sure I developed those coping skills just by watching that. But it started with food, and then, imagine a couple years later, you're a teenage girl who's looking to fill that void in your
Sure.
soul,
Sure.
through that pain. And then came boys.
Yeah.
And then came introduction to alcohol and marijuana. And then it was all of it.
A spiral.
Yeah,
Spiral.
it was a spiral. And so I was a young teen that was often in the vice principal's office. I had a special seat in the office. God love him. He had so much patience. But I, and what I understand now is also I had like a youth pastor. I had my pastor at the church. And I don't think my mom knew how to handle her own pain. But what I understand now is she was putting adults in my life that maybe could help.
Yeah.
But I didn't want anything to do with any of that.
Right. Of course
I
not.
didn't want the teacher's care. I didn't want the pastors. I didn't, I would go for walks with the pastor because I felt like I had to. But there was a sense of like, wow, he cares about me,
Yeah.
And I do remember feeling like, boy, I didn't get in trouble for that, or phew, I just made it. I don't think my vice principal knew I was drinking,
Yeah.
right? Or
Mhm.
or getting high at lunchtime, but but some of the byproducts of that would cause behavior, or, you know, failing grades, or, but anyway, I had a special seat in the vice principal's office.
Right. Right.
And
they
we had,
knew your situation, right?
he did know my situation. Yeah. And looking back as an adult, and now caring for kids in our community, like, I get it.
Yes.
Then I didn't.
I
just thought he was just doing his job, and I was just a number, and I walked the halls, and I did what little I could, and I got wrapped up in anything that I thought was filling that void.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened is I hit a bottom, you know, when all my friends went off to college and had a purpose. Like, I didn't even understand what SAT meant.
Yeah.
I just filled in holes because I had stuff to do,
Yeah.
you know, after school.
Right.
And
Right.
I had a social life I needed to get to, so I didn't aspire for anything. And so what happened was I started seeing some of my friends go off to college, or they started families young, and I didn't have any aspirations for anything. And my guidance counselor, like, you know, was trying to, like, shake some sense into me, and I had picked something on his shade there, that of careers that didn't need algebra, because I failed algebra like 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I'll just, you know, I'll be a hairdresser. And not to knock hairdressers, they're amazing. It's like a huge talent, but there's nothing in that I wanted. But I did go off to hairdressing school, and I failed, you know, and I had a nervous breakdown, between the eating disorder and the misuse of substance, and life situations of depression. You know, I realize now the alcohol just really sent me into a depression.
Yeah. How was your relationship with your mom at this point?
My mom was still, you know, doing her own coping skills. She was less and less involved. My brother and his wife really took me under their wing whenever they could. But again, I would start to feel better. I would live with them. I had to pull myself together because there was 3 kids in the home there. But then I would start to feel better, and I would be back out, you know, out there. And I'd want to live at my mom's because I had the freedom to be independent and live that lifestyle. And so fast forward, I guess you know, I went into treatment for an eating disorder. I went into several, you know, psych units. I kept bouncing in and out of institutions, just trying to, I thought it was my brain, you know, like maybe it's just, I'm a defect, you know, and I think what happened was, I had run into, you know, a few friends that asked me to, you know, maybe you should look at your drinking. and I was
people
like,
did mention that to you. People,
maybe you should, you know, and then I went to a therapist that said, you know, have you ever thought of quitting drinking? And I was like, you know, no, but you know, that's no big deal. Like,
so you were in denial.
I was in denial. I definitely was in denial. I had doctors asking me about my drinking, and I was not truthful. And I don't remember purposely trying to be not truthful. I thought I was answering correctly, because everybody around me was drinking similar, like the amounts or how they were living their life was similar. And what I found now is I would lose friends that would be in life situations and go off and, you know, do things in their life. And I would backpedal, and all of those things that we say, well, if I ever did this, then I would know that my life is in danger, and I probably would get my act together. What happened for me is I didn't feel like the world collapsed for me. I just would lower the bar. I kept lowering the bar.
So you never felt like you were hitting that rock bottom that people talk about.
I never did. And I think what what I was doing is I was just lowering my standards to
Right.
meet the need.
Right.
And so then, and I don't know exactly what caused me to think I just won't drink. And I would go with my friends to the bar, and which was a weekly occasion. I wasn't a daily drinker, but I
Mhm.
definitely was a binge drinker, what I understand now.
Okay.
And I had to announce, for some reason, it was like this, it was this mind thing, it was consumed my brain. All I kept thinking of was the fact that I needed to tell people I wasn't drinking.
Right.
And I thought that was just me caring about the fact that I don't drink, and then hence I don't have a problem.
Yeah.
And it was very distracting. It was very, so what happened was the eating disorder that I had been treated for back when I was 19. I'm now 24. I've got a 2-year-old in tow,
Oh, wow.
and I'm trying to
That
manage my drinking.
Yeah, I mean, that changes everything when now all of a sudden you have a child.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And the depression was still kicking in. I loved her to pieces. She was the most beautiful brown hair, curly, long eyelash,
It is beautiful. Mhm.
blue eyes, and
Mhm.
and uh but I just didn't want to be a mom. I didn't, like, I felt like I was failing at it. I just felt like a failure. Um so what do we do when we have that dysfunction in our bellies, right? We chase something to numb out.
Mhm.
And so I think my eating disorder really took off again.
Yeah.
And once again I hit an emotional bottom that was extremely hard.
Mhm.
um and and when I take away alcohol, um it was bad, and I got hospitalized again. In fact, I had to get medically stable before uh, a, a treatment center that had an eating disorders unit on one side, had an alcohol and drug disorder on wing on the other side. And I had to go and be in the medical part of it to be medically stable first before they could actually treat me in treatment in any type of um, you know social services or anything. I just needed to be medically stable
I'm sure
before I could work on
disorder got
treatment.
so out of control.
Yeah. And I ended up um so I ended up stopping and trying to to eat right and not drink. So then I had no vices.
Mhm.
And what happened for me is I just didn't want to live. I didn't want to live anymore. What happened was my vices got taken away, and I didn't have any tools to replace them.
Right. You didn't have the coping skills that you need, the healthy coping skills you needed.
I didn't, and I ended up joining a 12-step recovery program, and wrapped services around me. My doctor was lovely. I mean, she just retired a couple years ago, but she's been with me since a teenager. And I followed. I had so many supports. That vice principal still came to visit me even when I was 24 years old, and I had lots of supports around me. And I understand now my mom pushed those supports because she couldn't be there.
Yeah.
I definitely sought out, spiritual guidance. I got into just really working on who I was without the eating disorder and without alcohol.
Mhm.
And it's taken a lot of work, a lot of outside help.
Mhm.
I encourage that for anybody. I've been able to come to terms with who my mom was, even though she never got help.
Okay.
I was able to do, really dig in deep to some of my youth stuff and trauma. And and really understand really what ticked in me. And I was able to make amends to my mom. I was able to be there when she passed away, be very present. I, you know, I just, I can't say enough about getting the help that I needed, and that it's okay
Yeah.
to get the help, and that it can't just come from me saying, I want to stop.
Right.
Like, once you take something away, you got to replace it with something really healthy.
Of course. Yeah.
I'd say what's profound, some of the most profound moments of my recovery is um, I was best friends with my vice principal's daughter, and in treatment they came to see me, and I looked so bad. And she tells me about this now. I have vague memories of it, but she said that she got back into the car after they visited, and she looked at her dad, my vice principal, and said, "She's going to die, isn't she, Dad?" And he said, "She might."
Wow.
And he was, you know, to he watched me recover.
Yeah.
And when he passed away a few years ago, imagine hundreds of students, right, that he had, and all A's, or went off to do great things.
Right. Right.
He had cancer, and he planned his whole end of life. And at the funeral, his family said that he wanted me to speak at his funeral.
Wow.
And just a few months ago, his wife passed away, and the chair that was in his office is now in my office.
Wow,
And
Karen.
I get to do community work and just help look for those angry Karen Anns in the world, in our community. And I can't say enough, Allison, about being able to be brave enough to accept help.
Mm-hmm.
If anybody's out there and has a loved one that they're concerned about, um, there's more to my story. Recently, there's a lot of damage that happens as a result of one suicide. And in 2017, one of my brothers, who was actually in recovery but then stopped seeking solution. And I say recovery from alcohol and drugs is a lifelong process.
Yeah.
Just like an eating disorder, it's a lifelong process.
Sure.
It's daily work, but it's work that's worth it.
Mm-hmm.
My brother, for some reason, and I don't know why, stopped connecting with any of our family. Got really angry. I had to set boundaries, and we didn't speak for a year. And he jumped out an 18-story window, and died by suicide himself. And my mom passed away a few months after that. I can't imagine the heartache that she was going through. I mean, she lost her husband, and then she lost her son, and she battled, several different health issues, mainly for not treating her body right.
Yeah.
It was unhealthy eating, and it was alcohol misuse. And
And I suspect that she probably had some issues with depression as well.
I probably, yeah, towards the end of her life, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, my dad battled stuff that,
Mm-hmm.
a man can't talk about.
Right.
What I love is that I've turned my story into proactive solution, and I'm now on the board of NAMI Maine. And
Mm-hmm.
we just kicked off man therapy
Good.
.org. I think every man, and there's a lot of flack we get that from that, is why is it man therapy? And NAMI has lots of resources for lots of populations.
Mm-hmm.
But the truth is the the high rates of suicide are in men, in middle-aged men. And it still is stigma. It
Yeah.
still is stigma that you can't get help.
Yeah, even in this day and age, and I'd say probably with men more so, because I think men typically, not always, but they have a hard time talking about their emotions, talking about their, deep dark secrets or the things that are happening in their lives.
Yes.
You know,
Yes. And
especially probably when it comes to substance misuse and things like that, or
yeah.
suicide.
Yeah. And I lost another brother to suicide almost a year later. And then 2 weeks later, I lost my niece to suicide. And so I advocate for suicide prevention. Anytime that you can get into any type of conference, NAMI puts on amazing. Every state has a NAMI affiliate, and there's lots of resources. I encourage anybody to do anything on suicide awareness.
Tell us what NAMI stands for, just so we all know.
National Alliance of Mental Illness.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've heard of it, but in case somebody else hasn't, I hadn't heard of it until probably recently, in the last maybe 5 years. So,
yeah. And of course, as you can imagine, right now our push is for teens. For teens, especially youth. The onset now, for the average onset, is now become 7 years old for youth, dealing with anxiety and depression. And COVID definitely has made that even more.
The isolation, not being able to be around their friends, and then maybe being at home in difficult situations. And
there's also high rate, the climate around law enforcement and emergency medical services, firefighters.
So they're at risk.
Those are also climbing. Those rates are climbing as well. So there's definitely, I advocate for services within, those populations. Nobody's immune.
Right.
But I think that if I could share anything, it's that there is nothing wrong. You're helping others around you when you get help. And I think that as far as what I would share with family members is, when my brother and my sister-in-law started naming it and saying, "You need help," is when I couldn't ignore it anymore. When my family stopped looking the other way. When my mom even called my uncle, who's a pharmacist, and said, she thinks she needs to go away to a weight loss retreat, And that's literally what I told her when I felt suicidal myself. Is I thought, Mom, if I could just lose weight, if I went away to like a retreat, I'd be okay.
Be better. Because you were looking for that fix.
She had to actually, her and my doctor and my uncle actually had to let me believe that that's where I was going.
Right.
And there's nothing like hearing the lock of a door and your family walking away when you really have to look at, that you need help.
Karen Ann, let's talk a little bit about shame. One of my questions to you is, if myself or somebody that might be watching today has somebody that in their family, somebody they love or a close friend that they are concerned might be dealing with an addiction of some sort, how do we talk to those people, our friends, our family members, without creating a sense or a feeling of shame in them?
I think one of my I recently experienced a peer, and one of my other friends, said, "I don't know what it's like, but I'm always here to listen. I don't know what it's like to be you, but I'm here to listen, and I can sit with you." And that's the same with surviving suicide, of what to say to people that's experienced suicide in their families. Like, one of the things that Brene Brown put out an amazing little short clip on empathy. And the worst thing you could say is, well, at least, somebody said to me, at least, after my second brother and my niece died, at least your mom's not here now to see that. and that was like, you never want to say at least.
At least. And those people, I mean, they're well-meaning. They don't
They
mean
totally are.
But yeah, you do have to be mindful and sensitive about the things that you're saying to people.
Yeah, just literally being able to say, I'm here.
Yeah.
And I can help you, and I'll walk with you. And somebody, even in sobriety, I had a coach, so to speak, say to me, I'll walk to hell and back with you, but I can't go for you. And that was profound for me. That was a profound statement for me.
Yeah.
It made me realize I needed to do the work.
Well, I think as a family member that sees somebody that, you love so dearly struggling and suffering, you feel such a sense of helplessness. You don't know how to help them. And you obviously don't want them to feel shame, because there's nothing, how do I say this? It's like, it's out of their control. They have an illness, would you say?
It definitely is an illness, and that's something I really do want to touch upon, is because the difference between me and a social drinker, what I've come to understand now is it's a biochemical thing too, right? Yeah. And that when I put alcohol into my system, there's something that gets triggered.
Yeah.
And my body,
like a switch that goes on, and
my body wants more.
Yeah.
And so when we talk about, if you remember when I talked about, if I just decided to put the alcohol down, but I was obsessing over making sure people knew, that's something I don't think would happen with a social drinker. You think of folks that like put half a drink, and they, I've had enough, or, oh, I feel a little woozy. Me as an alcoholic, I don't know that experience, because once I put it in my system, and then when, say, the next day, right, then it's like a mental obsession. So it's almost like a triangle, right? It's a mental obsession that goes off in me that says, I'm not going to drink. I'm going to drink. I'm going to, or the planning of going out and who am I going to be with? And there's this mental obsession that has nothing to do, and it seems offensive to your loved ones. And when I was in that, it had nothing to do with how much I loved that beautiful 2-year-old baby.
Right.
It had everything to do with, there was something in my brain that was different than a social drinker.
Something that I've always wondered about for somebody that's in recovery, and when you still live your life, you still go out, I suspect that you are in situations where people are consuming alcohol. How does an alcoholic cope with that when you're in recovery?
Yeah, that's a great question. For a while, I did not. For a while, they talk about, my peers in recovery say you got to change your playmates and playgrounds.
Yeah, sure.
And that even included family sometimes. And sometimes family have a hard time understanding that. And what I've come to understand is that I just needed some time. There was some friends that were not alcoholic that I hung out with, but they might have a drink or two. Sure. And they were really hurt that I couldn't come be with them. And they'd be like, well, we don't have, like, I don't have to drink. And what I said to them is, but you don't understand. That's what I did when I was with you. So that's what I associate with. Right. Now I can spend time with them, and they can drink or not.
Sure.
But
so
it all depends on,
you had to go
I know where my gauge is.
Yeah.
And when that might not be a good atmosphere for me to be in. But what my checker is, do I have right reason to be at a function or with a certain person.
Yeah.
So I've had tools that I've been given of fact checking myself.
Okay, good. Yeah. Let's talk about enabling. And it's a term that I think we hear a lot when it comes to substance misuse and family members, friends enabling. So they know and maybe that's a part of being codependent, I don't know. But so they know that there's a problem, but it can't be addressed, or they don't want to address it. And so they're enabling the process, whether they're allowing the loved one to live with them, or they're giving the loved one money, whatever it may be. Can you talk to us a little bit about enabling?
Yeah, I watch it all the time. And, and obviously I help a lot of alcoholics, and unfortunately it sounds harsh, but I never want to take away someone's bottom. I don't want them to lose their life. So I need to understand those warning signs. But I never want to take away a bottom that will motivate them. Because if they're changing for me, or they're changing for their spouse, they're changing. I could not change for my little Mia.
Mm-hmm.
I had to hit a bottom for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a way to call someone out that loves, that you love,
Mm-hmm.
while also not cutting them off completely.
Yeah.
And calling it and naming it,
Yeah.
and I think the biggest thing that we forget to do is name it as a disease.
Mm-hmm.
That it is something biological.
Right.
And
they've lost control. They don't have control of it. And it's not
I think for parents it's particularly hard, because who doesn't blame themselves if it's their child?
Sure.
That what did I do wrong? Or, yeah. I easily could have played that card.
Yeah.
Blame my mom.
Sure.
And you know what the thing is I don't know. I don't know if it was atmosphere. I don't know if it's because of dad. I don't know if it's it's because of my genetics.
Mm-hmm.
That is the one thing that really calls me an alcoholic. It doesn't matter. All I know is I can't drink safely.
Yeah.
And I think when loved ones can name that for the people that they love and remind them they love them, and that's why they're saying it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's hard. That's not easy.
No.
It's really not easy.
Mm-hmm. I know that you have Mia, but you also have another daughter, Sammy.
I do.
So talk to me about how you talked to your girls about your substance misuse and your recovery.
Yeah, obviously I talked to them age appropriately, and I didn't always do that perfectly. Sometimes I overshared, sometimes I held back. I had a wise woman who was in recovery. She was an older woman in recovery as well. And I was bound and determined to, point out all my mom's faults, to this woman. And she used the F word. Actually, she said, "You're going to F it up some other way, Karen Ann, because we're all human." She's like, "You may not mess up like your mom did, but you are going to mess up. No, you're not going to be rendered perfect."
Yeah.
And I've accepted that. And I just kept living my life one day at a time and doing the best I can. But how I talk to my girls is I just was really transparent about it. And I let them know that unfortunately we don't know. We don't have a crystal ball. So you have to know that your mom has the makeup of an alcoholic.
Yeah.
And so that cuts your chances. And if you choose, and I did do some things, I took some classes that were going on. I was involved in, something called Communities That Care. So I did take some parenting classes, and that helped me talk about substance use and helped me talk about risk factors. I was willing to be the student. I was willing to learn how to be a mom.
Yeah.
I was learning I was willing to learn how to be an employee. I was willing to learn how to be a friend. I didn't even know how to be a friend.
Yeah.
I was alcoholic, so I took from everyone.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had help. I needed help on
Yeah.
every area of my life. I needed help.
Yeah. So let's end with two things. How can we, as family members, friends, loved ones of people who are struggling, and one of my concerns is people that are are struggling in silence, that they know they have a problem and they're too afraid to talk about it. How can we support them? And then I'd like you to end with what are some support and some resources that we can point people to if they really feel like they need to reach out and get help. So let's talk about how can we as family members and friends support.
Sure. I would say definitely turn to, there is 12-step program phone numbers in directory. You can look up AA, you can look up Al-Anon, you can look up Smart Recovery. I mean, you could Google alcoholism recovery and you could get a litany of, just start somewhere.
Right.
Your primary care physician,
Mm-hmm.
we have made huge strides on mental health and mental health well-being. So I would encourage anybody to talk to a doctor and ask for those resources. Um, anywhere you could go to ask for resources, whether it be your church or whether it be at your local Y,
Mm-hmm.
whether it be your doctor, a therapist. Oftentimes you go to a therapist and you end up realizing they have their own toolbox.
Yeah.
They can open up and give you numbers of resources.
Sure. And in this day and age, I think we have so many more resources than were available to us. And I feel like even though there is still some stigma attached, it's not as bad as it was. People are more open to talking about it. There's
Yeah.
a shame around it because I think now we do know that it is an illness, that there is a chemical issue happening. It's not just because the person is weak or they're lazy or whatever it is, they're a partier. There is something, like you said, biochemically happening with that person.
Correct.
Yeah. And so would it be appropriate if I knew somebody that was struggling to say, hey, I'll go to AA with you?
Yes.
That's okay. That's not
That is okay. There's and the best thing you could do is call, whatever state's hotline, and you can get a directory of where family members could come into an open meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And there's definitely other recovery systems out there. Different, just don't give up.
Mm-hmm.
Because oftentimes what happens is somebody goes to one source and say, I'll just do it on my own.
Mm-hmm.
And I can guarantee you 9 times out of 10, even if you did do it, that like 10% that can do it on their own, it's going to be that much harder.
Mm-hmm.
But don't do it alone. There's resources out there. There's people in recovery, just, and you really can have anonymity at your own comfort level.
Yeah.
I'm more vocal now. I'm 25 years sober.
Mm-hmm.
I'm more vocal now. I feel secure in my sobriety, but it doesn't mean that it couldn't happen. It's a daily reprieve, and I have to work at it
Daily.
every day, and I accept that.
Yeah.
Because the payoff is that rewarding. Now I help others, and that gives back to my own sobriety.
Yeah, God makes good things come from difficult situations. This just came to my mind, and so because it's in my mind, I really want to talk about it, and then we'll end on this. But because you've had, unfortunately, so much experience with suicide in your life, can you talk to us about warning signs or how we talk to somebody if we're concerned that they're thinking about taking their life?
Sure. I name it. Again, name it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really important that we say.
Give me an example so the people that are watching understand what you say when you say name it.
So if always ask, are you thinking of ending your life?
Mm-hmm.
Have you had thoughts of harming yourself?
Okay.
Definitely name it.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
And
those are that's the biggest thing. And then obviously follow through with getting help. And sometimes we don't make people happy when we reach out
right.
and get help.
Yeah.
It doesn't become it doesn't become their business anymore,
Mhm.
because it ends up being our business.
Yeah. Yeah. When it comes to somebody being, thinking about taking
And
their life.
I encourage anybody to take there's mental health first aid. Lady Gaga, you know,
Okay.
she advocates for that.
Okay.
That is
So we
everywhere.
can recognize the signs as family members or friends.
I encourage anybody to take mental health first aid. There's youth
Okay.
mental health first aid, mental health first aid. You don't have to even have somebody you're concerned about.
Okay.
It is important that everybody on this earth understand the techniques and the tools and the warning signs,
Okay.
because they're out there. They're your coworker, it's your
Sure.
boss, it's
Yeah.
your significant other, it's your children, it's your
Your
teacher.
neighbor. Yeah. Your neighbor. Yeah.
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 And there's tools. And in the end, there's nothing, you could say everything you think is perfect and you can't prevent it. They're
Mhm.
going to, if they're going to do it, they're going to do it. But the more we can educate ourselves, the better off we are. We're that much closer to saving someone's life.
Mhm. Mhm. Karen Ann, thank you so much. You are a blessing to so many. I thank God for you. I thank God that you fought the fight,
Yeah.
and you're here to talk about it, and you're here to help other people that are fighting
Yeah.
for their lives and for their sobriety. So God bless you, my friend. Thank you so much
Yeah.
for being here. And just hang on one second. I'm going to end this broadcast, but you and I can hop
Yeah.
in that. For all of you that watched, whether you watched live or you're catching on the replay, what I would say to you is if you are struggling with substance misuse or thoughts of suicide, please, please reach out to somebody that you trust, or somebody, one of the resources that Karen Ann talked about. And if you have comments, leave them here. If you have suggestions, if you have any advice that you want to share, please share it here. I thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to watch this. It's important information. God bless you, everybody. Take care. All right, hold on. I may lose you, Karen, and if I do, I'll send you a text.
Okay.
Okay.